Okay, this is students from Tanque Verde High School at the 2018 Festival of Books, and we are interviewing Victoria Aveyard.
All right, I'll start with the first question. So, my name is Kennedy, and I was curious, as a teen, what did you want to be when you grew up, and who inspired you to be an author?
Wow. Well, first, I want to say thank you guys so much for wanting to talk to me. That's always really cool. And when I was growing up, I really did want to be a writer. I didn't really know how to do that or what the path you take to that is until I was in high school. I feel like this is a job that doesn't really have a stratified way to get to where you want to go. So obviously, I had my, quote, normal aspirations as well. If I hadn't gotten into the colleges I gotten into for film and screenwriting, I was probably going to study history or archaeology and then been really upset when my life wasn't like Indiana Jones. And then inspiring me to be an author, I'd always loved writing since I was really, really young, especially just creating worlds, creating stories in those worlds. One of the first books that really got to me was Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. And then, of course, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. That was my watershed. And I think it is for most genre authors. That's the first thing you really come in contact with and the first thing that makes you want to do this.
My name's George. Huge fan. I was wondering, so what can you tell us about the Red Queen movie? Like, actors, how far is it?
I can tell you guys that we have a fantastic team in place. I've been so blown away, not just by how dedicated they are to the work and how much they want to tell this story, but how great they've been to me in letting me be involved. So they send me the scripts, they ask for my notes, which it can be a rarity in Hollywood. A lot of people have horror stories about their experiences adapting books. I'm also lucky in that I come from the film side of things, so I sort of know where I am needed and where I can add to the process and where I'm just going to be in the way. And it also has been really nice to just kind of have things where I can wash my hands of them. So, for example, every writer gets the question of who would you cast in your film adaptation of your book? And I love being able to say that is not my job. I don't have to worry about that. It's also just a problematic question in general, largely because you don't want to take away from the image of characters and world that a reader might have, especially when you're in books that have not had an adaptation yet. That's so personal, and it's not really something you want to take away. And then also it can create problems for film people if there is a production in the works, because you don't want the fandom or the readers to latch onto a certain actor and then be disappointed when somebody else is cast. So it's all just hoping to keep things fun for you guys and easy for us.
Yeah.
My name is Nat, and I was wondering if you based any events, places, or people in Red Queen off of real events, places, or people.
Yeah, the real reference for the world, because Red Queen takes place in what I call a post-apocalyptic North America. So society has fallen, and there have been, nuclear war, political abyss fallouts. There's also been climate change and geographic shifts. It's been really fun to write how that reforms afterwards. So something else has happened instead. And for that, I really took a lot of my inspiration from the Dark Ages. So that was the power vacuum after the fall of the Roman Empire. And in my head, this was the power vacuum in the modern Dark Ages after the fall of the American Empire and what that would look like and what reforms when the things we know are gone. So yeah, that was my big one for Red Queen. And then, of course, when you're writing politics, when you're writing oppression, you're taking from so many pieces in history, because that's been happening since caveman times. A lot of dictators, and nowadays a lot of people will ask, oh, is so-and-so this current politician? And sometimes people will like that, and sometimes people will get very mad at me for that and say, you're injecting politics too much into fantasy. And it's always very funny when someone says that, because then you ask, well, what do you mean there's too much politics in my fantasy? And they say, well, I just want to read the book. I just want to escape. I don't want to think about this stuff. And I will ask, have you read Harry Potter? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, well, you read politics in fantasy and you just didn't realize it. What did you think Pure Blood versus Mudblood was? What did you think that was talking about? X-Men can also be interpreted as an LGBT allegory. So it's very, very difficult to find anything that doesn't have some sort of refraction on society, politics, the issues that are happening in the contemporary world. So yeah, it's been a real ride, especially these last 2 years since the election. It's been very interesting writing politically in fantasy, in books that are considered for teens and young adults. I have found that young adults and teens have been the more politically active and the more politically aware of my readers, which is really, really fantastic. And I hope that trend continues.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and my question is, are you planning on or currently writing any other books?
Yes. It's funny. Last week, I sent off the last proof pass pages of the 4th Red Queen book, which comes out in May, and it's the last book in the series. So it's out of my hands now. It feels very weird. I kind of still feel numb to the whole thing because I've been writing these for the past 5 years of my life now. And I'm also really excited to be able to jump into some new stuff. I have some ideas, and I'm, number one, just really excited that publishers are like, yeah, let's keep working. You're going to be employed for another few years. And then at the same time, you're also very nervous because I've had the really amazing experience of getting readers and readers who want to stick with your series, who are excited for the next book. And so I'm hoping like they'll come with me to another sandbox, essentially, and they'll come with me to another world. And there's no guarantees in that. So hopefully it happens.
We certainly will. Hi, my name's Aiden. I was wondering if you ever considered any alternative endings to the books?
When I first was writing Red Queen, I did not know where the series was going to end. I knew it would be a series, but I didn't know what the ultimate goal was. I knew one emotional piece. I knew something. But I did not know the plot ending. I did not know where the actual story was going to end. And then in the second book, I figured out where I wanted to end, and it has not changed since then. It was funny, though, because this was originally planned as a trilogy, to find out while I was outlining the third book, you're not going to get to that ending in this one book. Or if you try, this book is going to be a doorstop and awful. So luckily, my publisher was very kind in saying, yeah, of course we'll publish another book. And now it's over. And in hindsight, I'm like, God, I wish I could have done it in 3. Then I would have been done. But then it's also, you still get to kind of have your final little tour. It's really been fantastic seeing how many people read these books and love them and can't wait for the last one.
My name is Sarah. My question is, you mentioned earlier that history and politics play a part in your book. But where and how did you get the idea for Red Queen as a whole?
Yeah. So the original germination of Red Queen, I'm a really visual writer, and the very first piece of this story that came to me was an image. It was a girl in an arena who's about to be executed, and I didn't know what she had done or why this was happening, but instead of being killed, she electrocutes her executioner. And I thought, wow, I would love to read more about this. I don't know what happened to get her here. I don't know what happened after. And I started asking myself questions of, who is this person? What kind of world does she exist in? What has to exist for this to be possible? And then those questions spawned more questions. And eventually I had a little bit of a central idea of, we're in a world where there are humans without superpowers and there are humans with superpowers who sort of rule the rest. And for whatever reason, this girl needs to be killed by them. And it was really interesting to go from that. So it started with the image, and then it was the world that this image existed in, and then the story kind of filled in the gaps in between.
What was the hardest part about writing this book or this series?
The hardest part about writing the first book was the fact that I was living at home. I had just graduated from college, had no job, living at home, writing this book, and I had kind of felt like I had squandered my chance. I had moved to Los Angeles for college to study film, and then moved home to Massachusetts. I'm from a really small town, and now I was, that kid at home who came back and was writing a book. That was really difficult because there were so many times where I thought, this book is terrible, and I don't know why I'm doing this. But luckily, my dad and my best friend were both reading chapters as I finished them. And when I got slow and I got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore, they were like, well, can you just tell us what happens? Because we really want to know what happens. I was like, fine, I'll write this book for you. And then it spiraled from there. The hardest thing about writing the series, and one of the hardest things about series is, in general, is escalation. So you always want to outdo what you did in the book before. And that happens on the more micro level, where in the book you always want to escalate as you're going towards the end of the book. And then the same is in the series. So there have been points where I'm like, I want to do this cool thing. And then I would realize I can't top that. I cannot do that until the fourth book. It's very formulaic, but it really works. And it's a great way to sort of ramp your audience and manipulate your audience into wanting to buy the next book. I've read a lot of reviews where people are like, oh, I didn't really like what happened, but man, the ending, now I have to read the next one. And I'm like, gotcha. So that's fun.
All right, so can you describe Mare's character development for us? Like, when she started, is she different than where she is now? And, like, how did you decide to change her like that?
Right. So you always want a character arc for the most part. If you have a character who doesn't learn anything or doesn't change, then usually that's very boring. A lot of people can do it. I don't think I can. So for her, I think one of the big things is she starts out this series with no hope and just understanding, like, this is what life is and there's nothing I can do about it. And of course, by the end of the series, she has learned there are so many things I can do about it. And not just me, other people who I thought had no power or had no effect can do things as well. So that was really one of those things I didn't really set out to do. It was just where she started. And then I realized, based on the character I had created, based on the way she was reacting to things, and based on the things that had happened to her, these were the natural steps that her personality would take, that her journey would take. And there are some times where she sort of falls off the wagon. In the third book especially, there are a lot of points where she's like, this is it, I'm done. I can't keep fighting. And then there are other points where she's like, I refuse to let this happen to me. And in the fourth book, there's a lot of, like, not only have I learned to change, but I can see it in the people I love, in my family, the people who taught me to think that there was no way out, are also now realizing themselves there is a way out. And that was a really powerful moment for me, for her to be seeing her parents, especially, through new eyes, and seeing what she has done to change them too. That was really cool.
I have, like, a goofy question.
Awesome.
Which of your characters would you want to date?
It's hard because somehow that's almost like a spoilery question. In a panel today, someone asked, like, who would you kiss, marry, kill out of your characters? And I'm like, well, you're essentially trying to tell me who, or ask me who I would pick out of the two main boys, which is what everybody is always asking me. Who would I date? I would probably date Mare's brother. He seems like a fun time, but not like a dummy. I think everybody else has
there's
their
a couple, like, like Shade.
Yeah, Shade. Yep.
Okay.
Although Bree and Tramy are pretty funny in their own right, and they have a couple of moments in the fourth book that I really enjoyed writing their dynamic.
Can we get a sneak peek of Warstorm?
A sneak peek. I said this in the last panel, so I guess I can say it. I mean, I don't know. Someone at my publisher might be like, be quiet. There's 5 point of views in the fourth book. So the first 2 had 1, the third one had 3, and then this one has 5. And I can't say who the new 3 are, but there are 2 that we've already seen before.
Is it the same 2 from the last book?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good.
Okay. And I was also wondering, you had talked about the politics earlier, and I was wondering how you interact with your readers online, or how much you do that, or does it ever affect you as a writer?
The election year in particular was very difficult, not just for me, but for many, many authors online. And it was very precarious waters, I think. And I didn't even get the brunt of it. You know, as a straight white girl, I had a lot of protections, whereas I had a lot of author friends who were, being vocal against Donald Trump as much as I was, but they were Muslim or they were LGBT, and they were getting just hammered in ways that were really, really horrendous. And then, of course, you have your readers who are still trying to interact with you and just talk books. And that's great, and that's been kind of the solace at the same time. So you have all this ugliness online, but you have all this great stuff as well, and it's really difficult to find the balance of the healthy pieces of that. Because on the one hand, you don't want to shut off from the news, you don't want to shut off from what's going on, but it can overwhelm you, and you can really want to retreat into your bubble. Sorry. Yeah, it's difficult, and it's still a balance I'm figuring out. But it is very nice to get readers and just fans of the things that I'm a fan of to interact with you. And that's still sort of like the pure side. And then, of course, there's the dark side as well.
Did any reviews ever bring you down?
Oh, plenty. And I'm one of the silly ones who still goes to Goodreads, and I will specifically read my 1-star reviews and get kind of be like, oh, you didn't get it. And it's like, well, no, you did something that they didn't connect with, and that's not your fault, and that's not their fault. And then there are people who are just flat out mean, and those ones are almost like, okay, this is comical at this point. You spent so much time writing this. Thanks.
Yeah, like the really long messages just
Yeah.
saying how much they hated it.
And the funny ones are the ones that are assume things about me that aren't true. I remember when I first published, I had a lot of people saying I was a paid actor. And I was like, wow, I'm so flattered. You thought I'm like someone paid me to be the face of this author? That's insane. Thank you. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Moving back to the book, what have you cut or changed from your very first draft of Red Queen?
It's interesting. When I wrote the first draft of Red Queen, I had no idea how long a YA novel was supposed to be. And of course, there's no set limit, but there is, like, you should not be this long. And I was that long. I also didn't know it was a word count thing. Coming from screenwriting, it's a page count thing. So I would like trim and try and be like, oh, I cut a page. That's great. And then they're like, well, you only cut 10 words to cut a page. That means nothing to me. Luckily, I had sent my manuscript to who would become my agent in a PDF, so she couldn't count the words. She read it anyways and was like, that was kind of long. And then she did the word count afterward, and she was like, this is about 40,000 words longer than it should be. And we're going to go through and edit, see if we work well together, and then we'll talk about signing. And I ended up cutting that 40,000 words. And you know what is insane? By cutting 40,000 words, almost nothing plot-wise in those books changed. There was like one character subplot that went away, and it was a terrible subplot. It was just like a knockoff situation. And the rest of it was just backstory, description, stuff I could have done later on in books. And she was really good at knowing, you know, there's something here. You've just layered a lot of stuff on it. Let's get rid of the stuff. And then the first draft ended up being, I think it was like 103,000 words at the end of it. So a lot went away. And they've gotten bigger as I've gone on. And I've started layering stuff back on as we go on. This last one is, I think, 190,000 words. So I like it's very pleasing on the shelf when the books get bigger.
Is there one subject as an author you would absolutely never write about, and what is it?
I don't think I could ever write romance. That's not where my talent lies. And I love reading those books. I just could not write them. I also don't think I could write contemporary fiction either. It's very difficult for me. It requires a completely different skill set. And I was talking about this in another panel, and another author was talking about how the things that we rely on in fantasy and sci-fi and genre, the world building, those like the backstory, the histories, it's not there in contemporary books. And so we're like, what do you do? Whereas real contemporary writers are like, well, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and this is how the story goes. And we're just like, you just spoke Greek to me. I don't know what you're talking about. So I think romance and contemporary, those are not my skill sets.
Which of your characters do you relate the most to, and why?
I put a little piece of me in pretty much all the characters, even the worst characters, because if you want to write honestly, you have to have some touchdown in that person that you understand, and something that you can hook into that helps you get their motivations and what they're doing, even if what they're doing is terrible. Obviously, the person I relate to most is Mare, because it's so difficult to write a first-person book and not relate to the person whose head you're in. So there's a lot of me in her. There's also a lot of things in her that I wish I was, and things in her that I'm very glad I'm not. It was really a great exercise to be like, oh, this is the wrong choice, and she's going to make it.
I kind of got 2 parts for this one. What would be your biggest accomplishment in your life, but also in your life as an author?
And maybe this counts for both, but I paid off my college loans, and that was pretty fantastic. That was a nice sword over my head for a very long time. So that was good. And then accomplishment as an author, I think just writing a book and having someone else read it and having someone else enjoy it to the point where they want to live in that world and they want to create in that world. The first time I ever saw fan fiction for Red Queen was really, really personal to me because I grew up writing fan fiction and I grew up playing in the sandboxes of these literary giants. And to know that someone else felt that way about something I had created was really special.
Congratulations on the loans.
Thank you.
What was your favorite book in the series to write?
It's hard because when you're in the moment of writing them, you hate them and you don't want to be doing it. I don't know if I have a particular book that is my favorite or if I have pieces that... No, I really liked King's Cage. I really loved the half of that book where Mare was in one place and everybody else was in another. And I really got to dig in on not just her, but Maven and what's going on in that side of things. That was really fun for me.
How important are the names to you in your books, and how did you come up with the names?
The names are interesting. A lot of people will have specific ways that they come up with names. They'll have the baby name books or whatever, and I've definitely gone through a lot of those. Sometimes I have an Excel sheet where I just make up names, and I'll have names that are for red people and names that are for silver people. The silver ones are a little more complicated, more like Latin-inspired, Roman imperial kind of sounding. And then the red names will be a little more common. So I could draw from that for a lot of more bit characters. But Mare popped in my head. Maven popped in my head. Kalorn popped in my head, just like fully formed as names. Cal was the one that was mainly constructed because I knew I was naming his house, his family, which could control fire. I named them Calor, which means heat. I felt very smart doing that. And so his nickname is Cal from his last name, and his first name is Tiberius because, again, that had the Roman flavor I was really going for. And I kind of wanted him to have a really ridiculous first name. And then in the fourth book, I get to do a lot of work with who uses his nickname and who doesn't and what he wants to be called because it deals with his identity and what he is choosing to be. I felt very smart. Yeah, so that was the most constructed name. And then Farley I named because she's based on my best friend, and my best friend's middle name is Farley.
That's cute.
Oh, thanks.
Cute. I really like that.
Are there any like new authors or new books that you would recommend?
New book, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black just came out, and I love that book so much. She's not a new author. She's like the queen of fairy books. But this one just came out a couple months ago, and it has been my favorite so far this year. I haven't read Children of Blood and Bone yet by Tony Adeyemi, but it just came out, and I've heard, the most amazing things about that. It's supposed to be fantastic. So I feel like that's the train to get on right now before it leaves the station.
So as someone who wants to be an author, an aspiring author, what advice would you give?
Write. Read. Those seem pretty simple, but those are the two major things. I studied screenwriting in college, but I think something that was also really valuable to me, besides reading and writing constantly, was to live my life and sort of do fun things and not isolate myself. We have this image of the writer as a very solitary creature in your little office tapping away at a typewriter. And while that's true while you're in the work, but you can't write life. You can't write real characters unless you've experienced things yourself. So it was really valuable to me to go to a college that sort of had a college life to it. And then I also would say you got to know your audience. You got to figure out who you're writing for, what kind of entertainment works for them. So when I was in school, I knew I really love popcorn movies. I really love Four Quadrants. I love blockbusters. I want to write the big movies that put people in the chair, full theaters, and they're laughing and cheering and crying with the movie and like fist pumping at the end. That's what I want to do. So those are the movies I went to see. It's really valuable to go see pop movies, essentially. And in film school, that was not necessarily popular. A lot of people were like, oh, go see Martin Scorsese or go do this and watch these old classics, which is great, but it's not valuable if you want to know what audiences want. And if you can't write what audiences want, you're not going to get your message across. It could be the most amazing thing, but if it's not entertaining, no one's going to stay. So that's really valuable to me.
If you were to put yourself in the book as a character, would you be a red or a silver?
I would definitely be a red who's like uninvolved. It's like, oh, you hear about that thing that happened? No.
I was wondering also, to add on to Kennedy's question, if you wanted to be a writer in the future, did you books that you're reading currently, do you ever feel like you're being influenced by their writing style in your own writing, or how do you stay true to your own style?
That's a really good question, because sometimes I am reading books that are so good and so inspiring that I have to put them down, especially if I'm drafting. When I'm drafting my actual work, I really have a hard time reading other YA in my genre. I will read some nonfiction usually if I'm drafting the book, or in the first draft where it's raw creation. Later on when I'm editing, I can go back and start layering in my YA again, but I do kind of have a hard time just because it either makes me want to go right, so I stop reading, or it intimidates me. And I'm like, why am I doing this? These other people are doing it so much better than me. What is the point? So it is difficult.
You mentioned earlier that some of the books that made you want to be a writer were like Lord of the Rings, but are there any books that you've read from childhood to today that you just keep coming back to that have given you inspiration, or the most amazing thing ever?
Yeah, for this series, the George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire books were absolutely one of the big inspirations, not just in the story itself, but the way that he manipulates a reader. I really loved it so much. I loved reading those books and realizing, like, I have to cover the last page of this chapter because my eye is going to immediately go to it, and then this character I'm reading is going to get their throat slit. And I don't want that spoiled for me for another 30 seconds. So I always would try to end my chapters on cliffhangers that I would want to cover if I was reading. But then at the same time, I'm like, I want characters you can't predict. I want characters who have great morality, who are going to make the wrong choices, going to make the right choices. I think that's much more interesting just to keep an audience on their toes, but also it really helps you ingest an extraordinary world if you have characters who act like real people. So it makes them easier to understand, and then it makes the world seem more real to you, even though it's crazy.
If you were to do a Kiss, Marry, Kill game out of your first 3 books, what would you choose?
Oh, a Kiss, Marry, Kill of the books. I love that. I would kiss Red Queen, I would kill Glass Sword, and I would marry King's Cage. That was pretty easy. Usually people ask about the characters, and I have to be like, I can't tell you.
Well, in the books, it's kind of easy to see the different plots.
You would think that.
What film school did you go to?
I went to the School of Cinematic Arts at the University of Southern California. So our schools are playing each other tonight. Arizona and USC have the Pac-12 basketball championship. So I got to get out of here.
If you could be anything else besides a writer, what would you be?
Oh my God, that would suck. I really don't know. I really do not know what I would be able to do. I'm not equipped with the skills for many other jobs. Maybe something for National Geographic would be interesting to me, but I, again, don't have the skills for it.
Do you have any questions for us? I don't know. Yeah, like in the school, I don't know.
Any questions for you guys? Yeah, do you have, creative fiction classes in high school? Do you have any?
No.
See?
I'm being a creative writing major at the U of A next year.
Well, there you go. See, don't feel bad though. I had no creative writing classes in my high school either. I didn't get to do those things. So it's not a make or break kind of thing. It's not, I didn't have the right resources.
We have a literature club where we choose a
cool.
book every month and we discuss it, and then we have writing circles, kind of.
That's fantastic.
She set all of them up.
Really?
Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just standing there, and then we just go off topic.
That's also really valuable, the writing circle, especially because you have to self-motivate. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to be writing for a grade and to know that you have to turn it in, and then it's another to do it for yourself when there's nothing writing on it. That's a really valuable skill to develop. So good for you.
Were you in any extracurriculars in high school, like sports or band or anything?
Yeah, I played sports. I played softball and field hockey. Yeah, and then extracurriculars. Our school had a talent variety show at the end of each year. And so my junior and senior year, I was like the assistant art director my junior year, and then my senior year was the art director / script writer. So I had a lot of stuff in that, and it was really nice because you could get out of class a lot. If you're like, I have to go do this for the talent show, and the teacher would be like, okay, fine, and then you would just leave.
What part do you play in the designing of your cover art?
The covers have been amazing. We've had a great experience. The first book, they asked, what kind of cover do you want? And that in itself is, from what I've heard, like a rare experience. Sometimes they'll just say, here's your cover and you're going to deal with it. Or they'll say like, here's the cover. Do you have any notes? And then you'll give their notes and they'll be like, no. But for me, they asked, what do you want? What do you like? And I sent them covers I liked. I said, I really like simple covers. I like a simple symbol in the middle, the name of the book, nothing fancy. I just want to catch an eye, and I also want it to be very universal. I want someone to be reading this on the subway and have every other person around them be like, I could read that book. Because unfortunately, you have to appeal to boys, and boys won't read books with girls on the covers, usually. I am proven wrong many times. So they came, I said I want an upside down crown, and they were like, great, can we add blood to it? And I was like, yes, you can add blood to it. My goodness. And we came back with that fantastic cover, which I think has sold more books than anything else that we've done. And it's sort of become a shorthand for the series. We have a bit of an iconography going on, which is awesome, that each book, it's going to be a crown, it's going to be just something different. It's been really cool to see people sort of theorize what each crown means. Sometimes now people are like, oh my God, there's more silver blood on this cover than there was on the last one. So that means more silver people are going to die. It's just wild.
Do you ever feel like the blood on the cover signifies what exactly happens in your book, or if some of those theories are correct?
I have no input whatsoever on how much or what kind of blood is on the covers. Usually my covers are designed when I'm 3/4 of the way through the book. So the cover artist has some of the story and not all of the story. So you guys can extrapolate from that what you would like.
If you could say anything to your fan base, what would you tell them?
I say this in the acknowledgments for this last book, but thank you guys so much for staying with me and for wanting to hear these stories. J.K. Rowling has this great quote that she said at the premiere of the last Harry Potter movie, which was, no story lives unless someone wants to listen. So thank you guys for listening. It's pretty amazing.
It's Nat. I was wondering if there are any, weird habits or something that you have while you're writing your book.
I don't know if it's weird. I do playlists, and a lot of authors do that, and partly it's procrastination, but it feels like work. Sometimes I talk to myself. I know in college, when I would be writing in the same room as my roommate, she would say, you are spaced out. Your eyes are glazed and your fingers are just going, and you're looking not at your computer screen. What is happening to you? And I'm like, I'm seeing it in my head and I'm just typing it. And now I'm lucky enough that I work from home in my little office and no one's there, so I can be as weird as I want.
Are you a morning writer or a nighttime writer?
I'm more morning. I try to be working by 10 a.m., depending on what time I walk the dog. But by 11, I'm really into it and cruising, and around 3, I lose steam, but I kind of make myself keep going until maybe 5, 6. And when my roommates come home, it's like, I'm all done. Super nice. But I try to keep those regular work hours, because that way it is a job. It's really easy to get caught up in sort of the wish fulfillment of this, and this is a job I've wanted my whole life. So it's easy to treat it as a dream, but you have to treat it as a job as well. I don't work on the weekends unless I'm on a really tight deadline, and that actually helps me get excited for Monday, to be ready to work again. It's very easy to burn out in this job. There is such a thing as working too much, and then you really screw yourself sometimes, and you need so much recovery time. So it's a balance. It's a balance to figure out, you gotta keep working every single day for a certain amount of time and just trick yourself into the routine.
And speaking of time,
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.